line between what we know and then what your imagination is adding in. How do you blur that line?
I thought actually you meant, what about fudging in the lab, you know?
Now we're in books here. We can fudge all we want,
Right.
legally.
It starts there also in the lab. You know, maybe I'm the only one who's ever smoothed a curve with some equation, trying to fit data that wouldn't ordinarily be there. So, but I think in books, again, just as Mark said, you start with something that's reasonable, and who knows, in 5 years that you may be even behind the times with that budget.
That sometimes you're not ahead of the curve enough. And I have a book called The Vault where I tend to try to come up with reasonable scientific rationales for ancient legends, and one was in The Vault, it was the Midas touch. And I had an idea about how it could maybe really actually have started the legend, but a scientific reason for it. And about a month after the book came out, I saw an article, I think it was in Popular Science, and a biologist at a university in New York had done that exact experiment and replicated what I had come up with in the novel. And so I was not far ahead at all.
Well, it didn't invalidate the novel.
No, it actually supported what I had come up with, so that was nice to see.
So as a surgeon and a scientist, this comes into play. I'll give you a very brief but specific example. On call as a surgeon, I was asked to assist a neurosurgeon to expose a biomedical device that had ruptured. And so I was providing exposure through the abdomen to where this device had been implanted, and then the neurosurgeon was going to remove the device and replace it. So after my exposure of the site for him, I was sitting back. We're still at the operating room table. I was not actively doing my work, but I had to close after that. So while we were sitting there, I started thinking, well, what if all of these devices like this malfunctioned? And that's not practical because the vast majority of all biomedical devices work very well. But then I had the idea, well, what if somebody sabotaged those to malfunction? And so that I think was the science is there, the science is good, but then the writer's imagination maybe comes into play. And so I developed, that's the book Rupture, and so I developed a protagonist, Eli Branch, who's a surgeon, to tackle that, because, you know, as a real surgeon, I don't want to tackle that because that would be disastrous. But he encounters these devices that are ruptured, that has to do with aortic aneurysm repair that are failing, and why are they failing? And he felt morally obligated to evaluate that. And then, just briefly, the same idea for the second book, Public Anatomy, has to do with robotic surgery. And so the idea, well, within robotic surgery, that's driven by the computers and robots. What if the robots start malfunctioning? Well, you know, they're computer-driven, they're not autonomous, but what if the human error is there that allows a robotics to be autonomous or to malfunction? And so that brings in the human element. I always think you have to have the science there, but bring in the human element that will be of interest to readers.
I recall when I was writing my first book, which was The Genesis Key, which was a biological, had a lot to do with biology, and I had a good friend of mine who was a biologist read through portions of it to make sure it was technically correct. And he said, yes, that's technically correct. But he got to one point where I was doing some sort of test, and he goes, well, that test that you have taking a few hours would actually take more like 12 weeks. And I said, well, you know what, I don't have 12 weeks on my timeline, so I'm just going to fudge it. And I don't think readers hold that sort of thing against you. I mean, as long as you
hold 12 weeks against you.
I mean, you may get the one stray email saying, well, I loved your book, but that test was a little crazy. The one thing I have learned is if you get any detail about a gun wrong, you will get many, many emails. Glock 9mm does not have a grip safety. I know because I have 3 of them.
You have to, when you go to the sources, you have to first Google and then see all the possibilities and see how you can actually work it in, if possible. Say, I'm looking to do this. Is this possible? Have an expert at the end tell you, but if you want to fudge it, you should actually do it this way. Include this other fact, so you don't get this reply, because the Cotopaxi is the only volcano in the northern Andes that has two types of eruptions. And one recurred every 2,000 years or so, and the others, the smaller ones, every 70 to 114 years for the last 2,000. And I said, wait a minute, we're both overdoing those, but the worst case scenario would be a rheolitic eruption. That's a kind of a magma that comes out with much more gas, much more explosive, that will make Mount St. Helens look like a little child compared to that much. And then when I went to the specialist, I said to him, he actually created the Institute of Geophysics in the Polytechnic University of Quito, and I said to him, I'm coming to talk to you about a potential rheolitic eruption of Cotopaxi. Looked at me and said, you want a coffee? We spoke for 2 hours, and he said, don't give my name. Because he said that geologists have never actually studied the fingerprints of such an eruption. They know what would happen from eruptions that have passed, but they don't know what the precursor signs are for it. It could be happening, we don't know.